There was a time when Mickey Rourke was one of Hollywood's brightest stars, admired for his rugged charm and the natural magnetism that made him unforgettable on screen. But behind the fame, pressure began to mount, and in his search for control, he made choices that would change not only his career but also his face forever. Today, his journey stands as one of the most tragic stories in Hollywood, a tale of talent, loss, and transformation that still leaves fans asking what really happened. Rising fame and the early image. Mickey Rourke burst onto the Hollywood scene in the early 1980s with a presence so intense that critics immediately drew comparisons to Marlon Brando and James Dean. Born Philip Andre Rourke Jr. in Schenectady, New York, in 1952, his early life was far from glamorous. He grew up in a turbulent household, often finding refuge in sports and, most notably, boxing. The discipline of the ring became both an outlet and a shield against the chaos of his upbringing. Yet as he matured, acting emerged as an escape from hardship, a way to channel the raw emotion he carried from his troubled childhood. That rawness became his greatest weapon. Unlike many of his contemporaries who polished their image for the screen, Rourke brought something different, an authenticity that made audiences believe every word, every gesture. His sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes, and unpredictable energy gave him an edge that directors loved and viewers couldn't ignore. Early roles in Body Heat and Diner showcased his natural charisma, while Francis Ford Coppola's Rumblefish positioned him as one of the most intriguing actors of his generation. By the mid-1980s, 9.5 Weeks turned him into an international sex symbol, and his smoldering chemistry with Kim Basinger left a mark on pop culture that still lingers. Rourke wasn't content to play safe roles. He chased parts that reflected his own complexity, like Harry Angel in Alan Parker's Angel Heart, a film that pushed boundaries with its blend of noir and supernatural elements, and Charles Bukowski's alter ego in Barfly, where his gritty performance felt less like acting and more like lived experience. These choices established him not just as another Hollywood leading man, but as an actor willing to take risks others wouldn't dare. At the height of his fame, magazines routinely named him among the sexiest men alive, and his face, equal parts rugged and refined, was splashed across billboards and movie posters worldwide. Yet with fame came pressure. Hollywood executives wanted him to mold himself into the next conventional superstar, but Rourke resisted. He clashed with directors, turned down roles that might have cemented him in blockbuster territory, and developed a reputation for being difficult. To him, authenticity mattered more than box office numbers, but his defiance came at a cost. As the 1990s approached, disillusionment with Hollywood grew stronger. Rourke turned back to his first love, boxing, seeking control and discipline that the film industry couldn't give him. What he didn't know was that this decision would set in motion a tragic chain of events. Years of brutal training and punishing matches left him with broken bones, facial injuries, and scars that no amount of stardom could erase. The rebel once defined by his natural beauty was about to enter a battle that would not only change his career but also his very identity. The boxing years and the first surgeries. When Mickey Rourke stepped away from Hollywood in the early 1990s, many believed it was just another rebellious move in a career defined by defiance. But for him, it was more than that. He had always felt caged by the politics of Hollywood, frustrated by directors and producers who wanted to control his every move. Returning to boxing, a sport he had loved since his youth, gave him the sense of freedom he craved. Yet this decision came at a devastating cost. Professional boxing is unforgiving, and Rourke's body paid the price. He suffered repeated injuries, broken nose, cheekbones, and damage to his lips. Each fight left a mark, and soon his once famous face bore the consequences of punches and broken cartilage. Unlike the controlled chaos of a movie set, the ring was merciless, and it was only a matter of time before the damage forced him to seek medical help. By the mid-1990s, Rourke began undergoing reconstructive surgeries. But what started as medical necessity gradually slipped into a spiral of cosmetic experimentation. The first operations were intended to repair his nose and cheeks, but the results were far from what he expected. Dissatisfied, he went back again and again, hoping to restore what had been lost. Instead, each procedure seemed to take him further away from the man he once was. Surgeons attempted to rebuild his features with cartilage from his ear, yet the changes left his face stretched and uneven. As the years went on, the difference became impossible to ignore. The sharp lines and rugged charm that once defined his look gave way to swelling, tightness, and distortion. Fans who remembered him from 9.5 Weeks in Angel Heart were stunned, struggling to recognize the man who had once been a sex symbol. Instead of admiration, whispers of, "What happened to him?" began to follow Rourke everywhere. The boxing ring had given him a temporary escape, but its consequences pushed him into the world of surgery. What was meant to heal his wounds now became the beginning of a much darker journey. Hollywood comeback and the tragic public reaction. By the early 2000s, Mickey Rourke had reached a breaking point. His boxing career had left him battered, both physically and emotionally, and the surgeries he underwent to repair the damage had dramatically changed his appearance. For years, roles that once came easily were slipping away. Casting directors hesitated, unsure of how audiences would respond to the altered face of a man once hailed as one of Hollywood's most magnetic actors. Then came a turning point. In 2008, Darren Aronofsky cast Rourke in The Wrestler, a low-budget film that would revive his career and remind the world of his immense talent. Playing Randy the Ram Robinson, a washed-up professional wrestler clinging to the remnants of fame, Rourke delivered a performance so raw and heartbreaking that it blurred the line between fiction and reality. Critics praised it as the role he was born to play, a character whose pain mirrored his own struggles with time, identity, and loss. The film earned him a Golden Globe, a BAFTA, and an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. For a brief moment, it seemed like Mickey Rourke had defied the odds and reclaimed his place in Hollywood. But while his performance was celebrated, the conversation around his appearance never stopped. Instead of admiration for his resilience, tabloids splashed unflattering headlines about his surgeries, overshadowing the brilliance of his craft. The cruel irony was that even at the peak of his comeback, his face became the story. Interviews often focused less on his acting and more on his altered looks, forcing him to explain and defend decisions he had long regretted. In candid moments, Rourke admitted that he had gone to the wrong guy for some procedures, expressing his own disappointment at the outcome. Fans who once swooned over his natural charisma were divided. Some applauded his honesty, while others could not look past the changes. The tragedy of his comeback was clear. He had finally proven himself again as an actor. But the world could not stop staring at what had become of his face, the emotional toll and isolation in later years. After The Wrestler, Mickey Rourke should have been enjoying the rewards of a triumphant comeback. Instead, he found himself caught in a painful cycle of public fascination and private struggle. The industry praised his acting, but the constant commentary on his looks left deep, emotional scars. For a man once celebrated as one of the most handsome actors of his generation, the loss of that identity was devastating. Rourke himself admitted in interviews that the surgeries had gone too far. He described sitting in recovery rooms, looking in the mirror, and realizing he no longer recognized the man staring back at him. He confessed that at times he hated what had been done to his face. These moments of regret weighed heavily on him, often leading to long periods of isolation. Instead of being remembered for his artistry, he was reduced to a tabloid headline about plastic surgery gone wrong. The emotional burden was magnified by his history of volatility and struggles with mental health. Rourke had never shied away from talking about his demons, admitting that depression and anger haunted him for decades. Friends noted that he often withdrew from social circles, choosing solitude over facing the cruel whispers of the press. The cost of his surgeries was not just physical. It eroded his confidence, fractured relationships, and deepened his sense of loneliness. By the mid-2000s, Rourke was still working, appearing in films and even taking roles in independent projects. But the roles were often secondary, nowhere near the leading man status he once held. Hollywood, a place that had once embraced him, now seemed to tolerate him more than celebrate him. While his talent remained undeniable, the stigma around his appearance overshadowed his contributions. For Rourke, each public outing was a reminder of what had been lost. The man who once drew audiences with his natural charisma now faced a painful reality. His face had become a symbol of Hollywood's darkest obsession, the relentless, unforgiving pursuit of youth and perfection. Attempts at redemption and personal reflections. Despite the scars, both physical and emotional, Mickey Rourke never completely gave up on himself. In the years following The Wrestler, he sought ways to reclaim pieces of the man he once was. He returned to smaller boxing exhibitions, not as a professional fighter, but as a way to stay grounded and connected to the discipline that had once saved him. At the same time, he continued to pursue acting, even if the roles were fewer and often supporting parts. Films like Iron Man 2, where he played the villain Whiplash, reminded audiences of his power on screen, though the conversation about his appearance still overshadowed his performances. Rourke spoke openly about his regrets, admitting that he had chosen the wrong surgeons and undergone unnecessary procedures. He didn't hide from the truth. In candid interviews, he acknowledged the pain of losing his natural looks and the shame of having to explain his choices to the public. Yet, there was also resilience in his words. He talked about moving forward, focusing on his health, and embracing a quieter life away from the spotlight when possible. Faith became a cornerstone of his healing. Raised Catholic, Rourke often spoke about how prayer and spirituality helped him through his darkest days. He credited his small circle of friends, his pets, and his faith for keeping him alive when despair felt overwhelming. In 2019, he made headlines when he delivered an emotional testimony at a church in Los Angeles, openly sharing his battles with depression and the emptiness that fame had left him with. Even with these reflections, Hollywood's obsession with image meant that Rourke was still viewed through the lens of tragedy. For many, his face told the story before his words ever could. But behind that, he was still a man searching for dignity, redemption, and peace. His willingness to confront his past with honesty and vulnerability became, in itself, a kind of redemption, a refusal to let shame silence him completely. Legacy, Then and Now, 2025, and the tragic lesson. As of 2025, Mickey Rourke is 72 years old, living with the weight of a career defined as much by brilliance as by tragedy. His journey from sex symbol to cautionary tale has become a permanent part of Hollywood lore. For younger generations, his name is often brought up in conversations about plastic surgery disasters, overshadowing the decades of extraordinary performances that made him a star. For those who remember his early work, the contrast between the man he once was and the man he has become is almost too painful to reconcile. Still, there is no denying his impact. Rourke remains an actor of immense talent, capable of delivering performances that cut to the bone. His role in The Wrestler continues to be studied in film schools as a masterclass in vulnerability. Yet the legacy of his appearance cannot be separated from the conversation. It is a reminder of the destructive power of fame, the cruelty of an industry obsessed with youth, and the personal cost of decisions made under pressure. In interviews over the past few years, Rourke has spoken with remarkable candor about his life. He admits his mistakes, acknowledges the surgeries that went too far, and reflects on the damage caused by his choices. But he also speaks about survival. Despite everything, career collapses, financial ruin, failed marriages, and the loss of his natural looks, he is still standing. In his own way, that survival is a kind of victory. The lesson of Mickey Rourke's story is both heartbreaking and profound. Fame gave him the world, but demanded too high a price. Surgery promised restoration, but delivered loss. In the end, his life has become a living cautionary tale about the dangers of chasing perfection and a testament to the resilience of a man who refuses to disappear. Mickey Rourke's story forces us to confront the darker side of Hollywood, the pressures, the mistakes, and the heavy toll of trying to hold on to youth. He was once admired for his natural charisma, and now he is remembered for a transformation that left the world stunned. But beneath it all, his journey is still about survival, honesty, and the cost of being human in an unforgiving spotlight. What do you think? Was Mickey Rourke's story one of tragedy, redemption, or both? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next story.